we're in part 5 of our series, Welcome Home, You Belong. And really the goal, the point of this message series that ends today was that know that you belong, that there's a place for you in His family, and there's a place for Him in your family. And some of you have heard welcome home, and you understand the importance of that, whether it was your first home as a couple or bringing home a baby or a visitor or a long trip, a loved one coming home or a soldier, or when you come to that house for Thanksgiving or Christmas and you feel like home. In John 14:23, this has been the passage that's kind of gone over the entire series. Jesus answering him, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and what? Make our home with him. He's saying, listen, if you'll listen to me, and if you'll hold dear to what I have to say, I want to come and live and make my home in you. Some of you at your homes, you have the Old Testament verse, for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Some of you from the New Testament, when Jesus was on the Sermon on the Mount, and he said, if you'll hear these words of mine and you'll put them into practice, it's like building your home on the rock. And when the storm comes, you will sustain them. And so our prayer is that God would make his home in us. Now, we've kind of looked at our lives as a real house and what that looks like. And in week 1, we talked about the door and the foyer. That at some point you kind of discovered, maybe you were a wanderer, haven't found what you were looking for, and all of a sudden you came to this person of Jesus and you had to decide, what am I going to do with him? And we looked at John 10:9 that says, Jesus says, I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he shall be saved and shall go in and out and find pasture. And many of us have come to that point of seeing that Jesus is the door. He is the Savior, that wide is the road to destruction, but narrow is the road that leads to life. And we open ourselves up to him, and we open our heart and our life for him to come in. But what we also realize is we kind of keep him in the foyer sometimes. Like, hey, Jesus, welcome in, but hey, don't go any further. I'm glad I have salvation. I'm glad I can call you Father, but just stay right here in the foyer. That in the foyer is really where we decide what we're going to do next. Some people, you stay at the foyer. Sometimes you deny them. Others, you say, hey, well, come on in. And usually you take them to the living room or reception area of your house. And we looked at the living room. It's usually visible to the front door. It's usually where your best furniture is. And we looked at the passage when Jesus came back to life and he was returning to his disciples' home, that he came in and they invited him in. And we said, you know what? If Jesus is in your home, then you really do have a living room, that he is alive and well. And if he's not alive and well in your home, you have lots of dead rooms, not living rooms. And then he looks to his disciples and he had something to say. And they were looking at him so intent, like, what is he going to say? And Jesus said, hey, do you have anything to eat? And he wanted his disciples to know, hey, you now know that I'm God, that I rose from the dead, but I'm the same God. And my purpose is to get to know you. So let's go to the kitchen table. And at the kitchen table is where every day happens, where meals happen, where conversations happen, where sads and glads are discussed. And this idea that Jesus says, I want to come in and I want to dine with you, happens in the living room. Then the next week, we looked at the laundry room. Typically a smaller room in your house, and it's more about function than form. Whoever does your laundry in your home is probably the more of the servant in your home. And there's no set time for the laundry room. You're always doing laundry. Maybe it's in the morning, maybe it's at night. It never ends. You're still going to have laundry. No matter how great that outfit looks, it's going to need to be laundered at some point. And we talked about this issue in our own lives of this sin. How do we deal with our sin? And how do we work through that properly? In the laundry, we looked at Isaiah 11:8 says, come now, let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are as red as crimson, they shall be made white as snow. And then last week, we went into the bedroom. And it got a little awkward for a couple points. But in the bedroom is the place of the most intimacy. And we said, let's put the master back in the bedroom. And we looked at Matthew 6:16 when Jesus says, but when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. That there's something about getting alone with God, and the things that happen in the bedroom you don't share with other people because it's so intimate. And that each of us desire to have a relationship with Jesus where we kind of have our own language, that Jesus speaks to you in a way that you know it's from him. And that wink or that stare or that look that you may have with a loved one, that Jesus desires that type of intimacy with you. So, as we finish up the series, where are we going next? And we're going to go to the wall of honor. The wall of honor. It's a place in your home where you honor your family or you honor those who've gone before you. Many of you may have seen this in your parents' home. You know, pictures weren't so readily available. Not everyone carried a camera in their phone. In fact, you probably can't go more than maybe 3 generations where you actually even have a picture of someone. And you might only have 1 or 2 that somehow they got a picture taken of them. And so that was very valuable. And that piece of paper, and they framed it, and they put it on a wall, and they were able to teach their kids and talk about their family. And people have different ways. You can go on Pinterest and you can look at different walls of honor on walls. And here are a couple examples and things that are going on. But here's what I find interesting is if you're 25 and younger, your digital imprint is so wide. Companies, what they're going to do is when you pass away, you'll be a virtual you. That your family will go to a computer screen. They have documentation of what you've done most days. What you've said, things you've posted, party. And so they develop your personality around your digital imprint. And your grandchildren will go to you and go, what should I do about college? What should I do about this? And then they're going to give advice based on your digital imprint. And it's going to change the way how we honor people. And that's still a little weird to me. But because everyone is posting everything about themselves, people are able to construct you and what you look at. That sound fun to y'all? Not really, right? I'll take the picture frames. And I want us to have a place of honor in your home. So I thought we'd have some fun on this. And I asked a couple people to show me their place. So Stefan, who's going to help us in a little bit, this was on, like I said, it's usually on in your parents' or your grandparents' homes. You'll see these pictures. And here's Stefan right here as a young kid. He looks really cute. And you'll see him in person here in a second. And then see if you can guess who this one is. Yeah, that's my bride. Looking good. Kelly's in 4th grade in this picture, and you're probably thinking, what is Kelly thinking about? Well, I think she was thinking about this 3rd grader. Yeah. So, the posed picture, let's get back to Kelly. Back then, pictures were posed. Now we kind of understand candid shots, and we like that better. But back then, we posed. So here's some that I got from Kelly's parents' or grandparents' house. We can go to the next one. And here is Kelly to the left here. This is a nice posed picture. They're all looking at this book. That's her brother Adam and her sister, and that's one of your cousins. Who's that? That's Justin. And there's Kelly. The teacher in her. You look like a miniature person right there, babe. I'm not that skirt. Was that strawberries on that? What is that? Homemade. Your mom made your clothing. I know. So on that subject, if you look at this Christmas picture, now I noticed that your brother and sister had matching sweatshirts, which I'm sure was all the rave, but you didn't get one. Is that a duck or a goose on your sweater? Is it a duck or a goose? Okay, and that was your choice to wear that day? Is that what it was? Okay, all right. Let's go to the next one here. So now is this glamour shots? Senior pictures. Okay, I was taking these on the wall, so that I saw there, and Kelly, of course, and she gets more beautiful every day. And she looks more beautiful today than she did yesterday. And these pictures do her no justice, glamour shot or not. Now, I did also think back to some pictures that were on our wall, and here's a couple of pictures of me here. Now, a couple of things I just want to note. These are obviously school pictures, Life Touch, right? And you remember when this new effect came out, 2-in-1 picture. But now listen, Mom, I love you, and I want to honor you today. But can I get a haircut on picture day? I mean, is that asking too much? Don't they give you a little notice? Now, yeah, on this first one, the hair's a little shorter on this side, and then maybe you tried, but my ears were all. This one, no way. That was just full blown on that one. And then you have that awkward picture when you're a little older. Here's an awkward picture to me. Ooh. That's my Olin Mills picture. Remember when they came to church and take everybody's picture? And that is a denim shirt with a sunflower tie there for. Okay, all right, let's get off me for a second. Who's this guy? Who is this guy? I mean, we're talking business in the front, party in the back. It's like a Mona Lisa. He just stares at you. He just, wherever you look at, he's just staring through your soul. Yes, that's our one and only. That's our worship leader, Chris, right there, huh? I mean, he was looking good back then. Probably a senior picture. You know, who doesn't want to take their senior picture on a white wicker chair? The thinking man. We're going to let that one sit for a while. No, it's great to look back at these pictures. Here was a picture of my mom and dad when they were younger. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for my mom and dad. And my mom's birthday was on Thanksgiving this year, and she turned 46. And my mom and dad have always provided a home where Jesus was praised. And I was encouraged to fall in love with God and fall in love with His Son. And, the fact that they attend church here is very special to me. And it takes a lot of them to put up with me. And but that was a picture of them that was up. And here's the only picture before me of both sides of my grandparents. This was at my mom and dad's wedding. And there's my brother Becky and Chuck. And my dad came into the family. We all became one family. And over here is my dad's dad, Grover, and his wife, Betty. And this is my papa and Jewel. And Papa died when I was 12 years old, and I spent a lot of my summers over in Calcasieu, Louisiana. Not the parish, the small town of Calcasieu, and he was a farmer. And some of my greatest memories as a kid is being around him. In fact, I keep his picture. I keep his picture with me every time, and this is a picture of the church that he served at for over 40 years, and he sat in the front row, in the front seat every single week, and I could go on and on about Pawpaw stories. You got them too, but I remember after lunch, we'd get up early, 6 a.m., have breakfast, work on the farm, and then lunch was around 11 o'clock. Actually, it was exactly 11 o'clock every single day, and we'd eat lunch, and then we would go walking, and Pawpaw, he was older in age at the time, and the farm was kind of smaller, but he would take me, all right, Jason, let's go for our walk. And we'd go for a walk. We'd walk a mile every single day, and we'd go to Uncle Joe's house. It was his brother-in-law, and Uncle Joe didn't know the Lord. And I remember walking and like, Papa, why are we doing this? And he said, Jason, Uncle Joe doesn't know the Lord. And the Bible says to tell him about it. And it's not 70 times 70. Doesn't mean 490. It means you never give up on people. And I want to see him in heaven one day. And sure, we'd walk into the house and he'd say, all right, Joe, you going to give your life to the Lord today? Oh, Webb, I don't want to hear about that today. Well, one day, Joe was 77 years old, and he finally gave his life to the Lord. And he's in heaven today. And I'm so thankful for memories like that my papa left a legacy of faith in my mom and in our family and in me. But walls of honor are just not for family. Some of you have visited. Some of you were there when these walls were constructed, like the Vietnam Memorial Wall. There's 58,195 names, and you can go and you can visit and you can honor and you can pay respect to those who are fallen. Some of you remember the Oklahoma City bombing, and you've been to that memorial, and when you go inside and you turn and they have every picture of the 168 people that were fallen on that morning. Maybe you've had a trip to New York and to the 9/11 memorial and the 2,996 names that are on both of the bases of those towers. I'm thankful for men like Ron White. Maybe you heard his story. The 2,300 soldiers who have fallen in Afghan or in Iraq, he goes and he writes their names. He has them memorized. He served as well. And he said, you know what? I want to honor these men. And so he goes from city to city and he puts up these blank walls and he has memorized everyone's class first, their full name, and he puts it on the wall so those can remember that. And it's this kind of spirit, it's this kind of remembrance that I think comes from the Lord and it comes from Scripture. And today we're going to look at it a little different. I'm not going to give you 4 points or 7 points. Really, I want to give you a mandate to honor those who have gone before you. And then at the end of the message, I want to tell you how. But if you got the word with you, I want you to turn to Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11, the entire chapter, we're going to try to get through parts of it this morning. And you may know, those of you who have been around the Bible, you know that this is considered the hall of faith or the hall of fame for believers. This was New Testament writers writing about those who had gone before them in the Old Testament. And so today we're gonna honor them as we look at that and see what the Lord has to say to us. Now, if you start in 11, verse 1, they're going to define what faith is. And it says this, Hebrews 11:1. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for. It is the evidence of things not seen. Now, every time we hear the word faith going through this passage, I want you to think back to this definition. And in our life and in my life, faith is the substance of things hoped for, meaning it's not there yet. We hope to see it one day. We hope that we might get there. But all we have right now is the faith that's inside of us. And that faith is the only substance for that thing that's hoped for. And then he says faith is the evidence of things not seen. He's saying, listen, it doesn't exist. It's never been done before. The only place that's ever been done is the part in your heart where you have faith. That's the only evidence we can ever find of the thing that's not seen. So let's go through this. Verse 4. By faith, Abel. Say that with me. By faith, Abel offered God to a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commanded as righteous, God commending him by accepting his gifts. And this is what it says, and through his faith, he died, but he still speaks. Is that true? Do you know people that have gone before you, that they've died, but they still speak? And here was Abel, who gave God his very best. And because of that, his brother was jealous. And really, Abel's kind of the first martyr for God. And so, Stephan, this is where I need your help. We're going to create our own little wall of honor this morning. You look cute with your 2 dogs back then. What were your dogs' names?
Ginger and Sandy.
Okay. You want to put their names on the wall too, maybe? Just kidding. All right, there's Abel. And what I love about the story of Abel, and I can't get so in depth in each one of these, but listen, let me tell you something. The mark that he left, that a righteous man that desires to do right before God. Remember, Adam and Eve, they messed up. God desired for them to spend forever with each other. Sin came in, but even born to Adam and Eve, here was Abel that had a desire to give God his very best in the offering. And I pray that would be the mark of our church and you, that we desire, you know, God, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. If I'm going to give my life to you, I'm going to give it all to you. And that kind of sold out, that kind of right living or righteousness made his brother so jealous that he killed him. Then it says, by faith, Enoch. Say it with me. By faith, Enoch. And it's interesting when you look at these New Testament writers and to see what was it they attributed to them. And here's, it says, by faith, Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death. And he was not found because God had taken him. Now, before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. So this we know about Enoch. Enoch never had a physical death on earth. That is, he was walking with the Lord just took him up. And it was a great picture of what's going to happen. Listen, church, understand me. Death has always been the enemy in you and I's life. The enemy comes to what? Kill, steal, and destroy. Jesus comes to give life and life to the fullest. And because sin entered in, Adam and Eve could no longer enjoy life forever with God. And so what had to happen? God gave his only son to be given on our behalf for what? So that we may have eternal what? Life. Life. And his design is for me and you to spend forever with him enjoying life. And here was Enoch. It said what? He pleased God. And thankfully, they tell us how to please God. What does it say? Now, before he was taken, he was commended as having pleased God. And listen, here's the truth. And without faith, it is what? Impossible to please him. We see this picture. Okay, here's Enoch. God, what you desire. You desire faith, substance of things hoped for, evidence of things not seen. And that pleases you. In fact, it's impossible to please you without that kind of faith. And Enoch walked in such a way that God said, come on up here. Your faith has pleased me. Have you ever had a son and daughter just please your socks off? And you'll give them anything and do anything for them? And for whatever reason, he decided for Enoch to come on up. Verse 7. By faith, Noah. Say, by faith, Noah. All right? Now, you know a lot about Noah and building the ark, but let's listen here. What's accredited to Noah? By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events yet unseen, in reverent fear, constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this, he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteous that comes by faith. Listen, what was it he says? He says that Noah in reverent fear. I love that. Such a great way to say it. Noah said, I fear God more than I fear man. And yes, these things have never been seen before. I've never seen it rain before. But God told me to do this. And if I don't do it, I fear him more than I fear what people around me will say or do. Is that relevant today? Amen. That we do not fear man. We do not fear the world. The Bible says 365 times, do not fear. Do you remember Matthew 10:28? Jesus said, do not be afraid of those who can kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Verse 8, by faith, Abraham. Say, by faith, Abraham. Now, Abraham, he gets about three things that were credited to him. We see at first, he went out not knowing where he was going. When he heard God, God literally said, pick up your stuff and go. And Abraham said, where are we going? And God said, don't worry about it yet. Do you see the faith in that? Hey, let's go. Where are we going? Can't tell you. Just go. That's the kind of faith that he wants to call us to. I was talking to someone yesterday about the church and talking about the future of the church. I said, listen, we're on a journey as a church, and I'm not sure where all God's going to take us. I know what he's told us now, and so it's kind of like headlights on a car. He's given us vision to go right there, and that's where we're going to go. And he's going to continue to give us vision. He's going to continue to speak to us. We're going to pray, and we're going to fast, and he's going to lead us. And we're going to say, hey, wherever you go, we're going to go. So don't ask me for a 25-year plan. I don't know where God's going to take us in 25 years. But I know where he's taking us right now, and we're going to journey on with him. And oddly, when I was driving home last night on 288, 70 miles, and my headlights went out, and which was kind of odd, but it was a good reminder that we can only go where our headlights will lead us. Then in verse 9, it says, by faith, Abraham went to live in a land of the promise, in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him from some promise. In verse 11, we hear about his wife, Sarah. By faith, Sarah. Say, by faith, Sarah. Now, some of you know this story, and this is crazy. Here, Abraham has been promised these descendants that he's going to have a family that's like the stars in the sky and the grains of the sand. And guess what? His wife Sarah is how old? 90 years old. And what's accredited to Sarah? By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Uh-oh. Now, do you see how she displayed faith in this one? She considered him faithful who had what? Promised. Listen, sometimes that's all you got is a promise from God. Maybe he spoke to you 25 years ago, 30 years. Some of you remember a time when God spoke to you and you haven't forgotten it. Listen, that is a promise from God. And there is going to be a day that's going to come true. He hasn't forgotten. And in his timing, his promise will come true. And can you imagine Sarah at 90 years old being told, not only is she going to give birth, but they're going to have enough children for the stars and the... Do you see how it would only take faith to believe in something like that? By faith, Sarah. If you look at verse 17, it goes on about faith with Abraham, that when he was tested, he offered up Isaac. And when he had received the promises, that was in the act of offering up his only son. You remember that story, don't you? So God's given them Isaac. And God says, Abraham, take Isaac up to Mount Moriah and go worship there. First time the word worship is ever mentioned, that he was asking Abraham to sacrifice his only son. And they're going up that mountain. And Isaac looks at Abraham and says, Father, I got the wood. Where is the lamb for the sacrifice? And Abraham looks at his son Isaac and says, God will what? God will provide. Jehovah Jireh. And goes up there, and Abraham, the unthinkable, he's about to take the life of his son. And God is testing his what? His faith. Abraham, I've promised you, you're going to have an incredible lineage. But now I'm telling you to kill your son. That doesn't make sense. But Abraham, in his mind, is I'm going to trust God. And right before, when he knows his heart is ready to kill his son, he goes, no. And he looks, and what does he see? A ram in the thicket. And listen, guys, I'm telling you, sometimes it goes that far with you. That God's got to take you to a place where finally there's something that breaks in your heart that says, I'm willing to give up anything for God. Verse 20, by faith, Isaac. Say, by faith, Isaac. I love this. By faith, Isaac invoked future blessings on Jacob and Esau. Some of you are in a position, you need to start evoking blessings on your family. And Isaac came to a place, he was understanding what was happening, what God was doing. And he invoked, that he ushered in blessing for the covering of the line of Abraham. And that was the most faithful thing that Isaac could have done in that moment. Verse 21, by faith, Jacob. Say it with me, by faith, Jacob. Jacob is Isaac's son. And look, you remember Isaac invokes this blessing, and by faith, what did Jacob do? When dying, he blessed each of the sons of Joseph and Joseph's kids, bowing in worship over the head of the staff. That it was Isaac's promise for his family, that Jacob, by faith, remember Jacob, he's the one that wrestled with God. He was kind of a deceiver before he finally gave his life to God. He wrestled and he walked around a limp after that. Can anyone testify? I can. Anybody thought they were something and God had to remind you that you're nothing without me, and you have some consequences from that pride in your life, and you kind of walk around with a limp, but you'd rather walk around with a limp and know who God is than trying to convince yourself you're somebody you're not? Can anybody testify to that? Amen. And so Jacob was going to give a different kind of blessing over his children. So thankful for those families who did what? I want my house to be blessed. I want to be a mom and dad who loves God. I want there to be a legacy of faith in my house. And for some of them, if they're starting, they are chain breakers. And they're saying, no, for this day in my family, we're going to serve the Lord. And we're going to do it different. And I'm going to pray over my kids. And I'm going to be a good example for my kids. And I'm going to get up in a public place and just declare that. Because it's not about me. It's what I want for my home and the blessing and the legacy that I want. Verse 22, by faith, Joseph. By faith, Joseph. Say it with me. By faith, Joseph. We ought to give him lots of different colors. You remember Joseph and the coat of many colors and the blessing that he had and the favor that he gained with Potiphar in his house. too much. His wife sought favor in Joseph as well and pursued him, and he resisted that. It says this is so bizarre and fun and interesting. By faith, Joseph, if there's an archetype of Jesus in the Old Testament, it's probably Joseph. His brothers, put him in the pit, sold him into slavery. He comes back, he's king, and he could really get back after them in revenge, but he doesn't. And what's accredited to him at the end of his life, he made mention of the exodus of the Israelites and gave directions concerning his bones, which you know what his faith was? To tell the truth at the end of his life. You've seen this before? That actually Jacob's great story was at the end of his life to just give an accurate account of what happened. Have you experienced the person who lives to be older? They want to kind of change the story to make them sound a little better or explain things out. But no, Jacob facing the people of that said, no, let me tell you exactly how it went down. And he was a truth teller. You could read on, and we get to Moses, sorry. By faith, Moses. Say, by faith, Moses. Now, Moses gets the most verses here. The New Testament writers, the story of Moses has been shown multiple Hollywood productions over the last 50 years. It's the most told story of the Bible in the Old Testament, and it goes through that. But look at 25. It says, this is how by faith what Moses did. Choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. That faith for him was not to be in the king's palace, enjoying the king's table and all the power, when he knew his people were out there being slaves. And in him, he said, that's not right. And I would rather go be a slave and be who I am than to enjoy this house when that's not who I am. And what a great lesson to say this, that I'd rather be mistreated than enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. Anybody testify to that? How sin is so enticing. In that moment, it feels like the most pleasurable thing in the entire world. But it's fleeting, isn't it? And we just chase to the next one and to the next one. It was Moses' faith that taught us that. He kept the Passover. He let them out of Egypt. By faith, the people crossed the Red Sea on the dry land. Verse 30, by faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. And then verse 31, by faith, Rahab. Say, by faith, Rahab. Beautiful story of Rahab. Some of you remember it. There were some spies that went to go scope out the territory that was going to be destroyed. And Rahab was a lady of the night, or a prostitute. And she let these two men come in to her home to hide. Now, we don't know Rahab's intention for that she may have saw some out-of-towners and thought that they might be good clients. But what happened when they got there, she saw two men who treated her the way that she was to be treated. She experienced honor for the very first time. Someone that was not going there to get something from her or for something for themselves. And because of Rahab's hospitality, her faith to go, this might be an enemy, but I'm going to allow them to come in. And when they came in, she realized that these people were from God. They decided to save her. And what was the plan? Do you remember? They said, throw a scarlet rope over the wall that you and your family can escape from. And here was Rahab. Those that have been in that field understand the scars and the damage from anyone who's been sexually abused in any way. And here's Jesus always making a way when there seems to be no way. And she thought that was her lot. That's what people knew her about in that city. All of a sudden, that scarlet rope gets thrown over. They get to exit. And guess what? One of those spies, Boaz, what does he do? He marries her. And Rahab is a godly woman. And her home is established. And if you look at Matthew, when Jesus is going through the lineage of his, who does he mention? He mentions Rahab because she's not a prostitute anymore. He's proud. And back then, you didn't put women in your lineage. You only put the men. But there's 3 women listed in Matthew there. And Rahab is one of them because she had great faith. In verse 32, the writer of Hebrews says, "And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah." For you Duck Dynasty fans, I know that this is the last season, so you're grieving over that. But Jep was named after Jephthah there. It's an odd name. David and Samuel. And listen to what he has to say. Verse 33. There's a shift here. Look at verse 33. Who, through faith, not by faith anymore. Listen up. There's something happening here, guys. Listen, it's not by faith, but through faith. What do they do? They conquered kingdoms. They enforced justice. They obtained promises. They stopped the mouths of lions. They quenched the power of fire. They escaped the edge of the sword. They were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release so they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. Verse 37, they were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were killed with the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats, destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. Can I just tell you, for some of you out there that might are susceptible to believe in the lie of a health, wealth, prosperity, can I remind you of these heroes of the faith that came and what they say? Through faith, all these things happened to them. That it was faith that got them through. And guess what? They all didn't make it to the other side. They all weren't healthy and they all weren't wealthy, were they? And listen, those times are coming in you and I's life. And it's going to be through our faith that we get through them. It's the perseverance of the saints. They had a desire to know, it says they were exiles, that this was not their home. They knew their home was in heaven. And in verse 38, of whom the world was not worthy. Of whom the world was not worthy. It wasn't about a golden tower for them here on earth. They didn't store up treasures here on earth. They were storing up treasures in heaven. And this world did not know how to recognize them. So, what's the point? You honor those before you by running the race before you. This is what I want to do. I want to pause here in the message. I've got one more point to give. But before I give that next point, I just thought it may be appropriate for today. That maybe as we're talking about honoring those who went before you, that there's someone who's in heaven today, someone who went before you that you would just like to honor today. And so what I'm going to ask that you do as a family, or if you have a name, I want you to come to this side. We've got some frames over here, and I want you just to write their name. You can write their first name or what you know, and Stephen will get it hung for you. But I want to give you an opportunity to honor someone who's gone before you, someone who has poured in courage and poured in faith to you. Chris is going to sing over us as we do that, and then I've got one more point to share after that. I want to pray for you, and I think we've got, maybe 14 or so frames. So if when those are full, we'll be done with that. But I really want to give you an opportunity to create a wall of honor for you. I just want to close by reading the next verse. You can continue to play, Chris. The breakdown of chapters and verses are not inspired. That was done by later to help us organize it. But I really think verse 12 should be a part of chapter 11. Verse 12, first verse says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which so clings to us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us." That was the point of 11. Listen, guys, there's a cloud of people. And the way that we honor the ones that have gone before you is for you to what? To run your race. That is what? That is set before you, and run with perseverance and run with endurance. We run because of Abel and Noah and Abraham and Sarah and Jacob and Joseph and Moses and Enoch and Isaac and David and Rahab and Samson and Samuel and Gideon and Jephthah and Barak, and because of Debbie and Martha and George and some others I can't read over there. We'll get them all up in a second. Do you feel it? Do you sense it? Do you know? Listen, hey, this ain't my home. One day I'm going to be in Jesus, but until I'm going to give everything I have so one day Jesus can say, well done, good and faithful. I don't know what the race he is setting before you. I don't know what your next step that you feel him calling you to, but I can tell you, trust him. For some of you, it's salvation. For some of you, you've heard about Jesus, you've been to church, but you've never made it personal. It's never gone from your head to your heart. And today, you know what? I'm taking that step of faith. I don't know what God has in store for me. I hope it's going to be good, but no guarantees. I don't know what my life would look like following Jesus, but I've got some faith inside of me. And I hear Jesus calling me to come be a son and daughter. And if that's you today, take that step. For some of you, it's going public with your faith. That there may be 4 or 5 people in your life that know that you're a Christ follower, that you just need to have some conversations with your spouse or siblings or friends and going, listen, I know we talk about a lot of things in sports and politics or this or that or this hobby, but I want you to know I'm a Christ follower. Some of you, it's hard for you to say that because you've never made it public through baptism. Do it. Some of you say, I was baptized as a small child, and it was my parents' decision. Great. Your parents had a great desire for you. But baptism is after your decision. It's your decision to get baptized. In fact, next week, we're going to have a baptism. Jerome's going to get baptized. And if anyone wants to join him, join him. Make it public. Go public with your faith. Maybe it's like Abraham. He's calling you somewhere where you know what's going to happen. You don't know what's there. I don't know who you're related with in this story, but I want you to trust God no matter where he's taking you. Would you pray with me?